Hey friends, welcome back, or if you're new here, welcome for the first time. My name's Kimberly and I am the person behind this channel, and you are about to enter another episode of What Not to Do with Kimberly. Okay, this whole Bible lesson is super cool, and the symbolism behind the art that I'm going to do and explain is super cool, but I make a few mistakes that you can laugh at as we go along. Okay, so what I'm showing you is that I got the inspiration to do this page from the devotional 100 Days of Bible Promises. There was a scripture that just jumped out at me in a new way. And I have a friend over on Instagram who prints things in her printer on book pages. So I decided I was going to do that today. And I just grabbed a random piece of book page because, yeah, I've dissected books and I keep the pages to do art and different things with. And so I printed this photograph that I took of these beautiful flowers right onto that page. And as God would do it, you know how he just does things that are so cool, the page that I chose and the paragraph that's written on the top of that flower totally explains the woman at the well, like unbelievably so. So I was going to use that page in my art journal, but I'm like, oh my goodness, I was going to do the woman at the well today. This has got to go in my Bible. So we are talking about the woman at the well, and I'm in John's version of the story. And it is John 4, about 27 and 28 is where, and 29 is where I'm focusing, but the story's fairly long if you look at her whole story. So, I've heard this story preached on numerous times. I've read it numerous times, and just as God does, the Bible, always has fresh insight for us. And so I was reading it along, and the passage that just jumped out at me, it says, "Then the woman left her water jar. She went into town and told the men, 'Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be our Messiah?'" Okay, so that's huge. If you don't know the history of the woman at the well, she was a woman who had had 5 husbands, and the man she was currently with, she wasn't married to. This was a huge source of shame back in her time, and I think in Christian circles, it could carry a similar level of shame for a lot of women today, but probably not as much so as back then. But well, I'm not going to judge somebody's shame because we all carry shame over different things. So anyway, yesterday and today, the point is that she carried an enormous amount of shame, so much so that she couldn't go get water from the well in the mornings with the other women, because the other women would go in the mornings, and she was there at noon. And I've always heard it preached that it was so cool that Jesus was there, because it talks about he was right there at noon, sitting there waiting for her, and how Jesus will meet us right where we're at, and he goes out of his way to find us, and yeah, all that's super cool. But what jumped out at me was the fact that she ran back to town, this woman who had carried shame her whole adult life, after all these failed marriages, and this new, we'll call a live-in boyfriend like we'd have today. Jesus said all that straight to her face, and after her encounter with him, she ran back to town, and her story did not carry shame anymore. Her circumstances didn't change. It didn't say like she left the guy or whatever. I don't know. We don't know if she said get out or marry me, or we don't know. But what's amazing is we know her story radically changed from her perspective, from shame to one of testimony, because she immediately after her encounter with Jesus went into town and said, "This guy told me everything I ever did." And all those things were so full of shame, she would have never gone to town and risked saying all that. She was kind of a woman in hiding because of her stories. But now her stories became redemptive. And you guys, because she shared her story, the Samaritans who were not friendly with the Jews, there were, does it say, let me see if the Bible says how many. It just says many of the Samaritans from that town believed in Jesus because of this woman's testimony. So that's incredible. This whole story is incredible. It pretty much takes up the whole left page here of my Bible and a little bit into the top of the right page. So what I wanted to do, I have this cute little jar, and I wanted to symbolize like her jar of water. She probably would have had a clay pot, right? She probably didn't have a cute glass canning jar, but I don't have a clay pot, folks. I have a canning jar. So I wanted to symbolize that she left her jar, because it says she left her jar at the well. And I've also heard that talked about as, that she had now had the living water of Christ, because that's what she asked for, and that she wouldn't, she didn't need to keep going to the well. Now, I don't know if she had a supernatural ability to not drink water, or if it was more symbolically. It doesn't matter. It says she left her jar behind, which means she left the shame behind. She left her old life behind. She left life the way she knew it behind. And that's so cool after having this one simple encounter with Christ. And she had shame because in the beginning she talks about why are you here? Why would you want water from me? Why are you even talking to me? I'm a Samaritan woman. And so, and she doesn't tell him her story. And so I was just thinking, what are the ramifications of this? And how do we really apply this to our lives today? What does this say to us? In the places where we're feeling stuck or where we're in shame, I think a lot of times, if you're anything like me, you kind of try to pray those and kind of hope that they'll go away, or you're not sure what God thinks of you. He loves you, but if you're anything like me, you might worry that he's a little disappointed in you in different areas. And so I don't try to hide things from God, but I also realize that sometimes I am not quick to bring things to God if I'm worried about shame or embarrassment or things like that. And so, but when we're with Christ and he calls out the things we've been ashamed of, they just become a fact, a part of life. He doesn't shame us, and he just talks about it, and he heals us from that shame. So that is just super encouraging. Okay, shifting focus for a minute here. We're doing, I don't know if you saw mistake number 1, but I created the jar as a tip-in so I could see all the text, and then I used a flower that you can't see through to hold it to the page, and now I stapled 2 pages together. Guys, there's a reason God gave me the nickname Messy Princess. I'm telling you. Oh, I'm telling you. Okay. So, I loved the staple idea just because I love texture, and there was so much texture going on this page and layers, and you can see under the flower and read the text, though. That's pretty fantastic. And I separated the pages. Maybe we can put a Band-Aid on the other page, and that can be its own story for another day. But anyway, so you saw me drawing part of this stem that's going into the jar, and I put some water with the India ink, and it did bleed a little bit because stems in jars are kind of distorted by the glass, so I wanted it to look a little bit more real. And now I'm just writing over here, after her experience with Jesus, she had no more shame. She used her story as a testimony, and as a result, many came to believe in Jesus. So it's got me thinking, what stories, what things in my life do I need to just say, okay, Jesus, I've got shame over this, or I've got embarrassment, or I wish this wasn't happening, or I wish this hadn't happened, whatever it is, and just bring it before him. and be willing for that to be part of the story that he chooses to use to bring others closer to him. Now that takes a certain amount of vulnerability. Well, actually a lot of vulnerability. But this woman who was otherwise quite vulnerable and hidden now became an amazing evangelist, really, in Samaria. Like, unbelievable. So again, there's so many layers to this story. Like, I could do like 4 different like little talks right now on different things that I want to, but I'm trying to stick to this point so we don't go too far into the weeds on this, on a rabbit trail. But I've just been thinking about the ramifications of this. What if an encounter with Christ healed some things in me that I think sometimes we feel like kind of these shameful or embarrassing things, maybe not that they can't be healed, because we know God can do anything, but they just feel kind of impossible. Like, it's just like, you know, I've dug myself in a hole, or whatever it is. It might be finances, it might be husbands, it might be addictions, it might be behaviors, it might be attitudes, it might be faith or the lack of it. Like, we got all these things, and I think sometimes when we carry shame around things, it just it's a great, fantastic tool to keep us quiet, right? Because it's the one thing we don't want to talk about. It could be past abuse from when you were a kid and you're carrying somebody else's shame that was never meant for you to carry anyway. There's just so many different things. So I'd encourage you to kind of, okay, so we're going to get a little symbolic here. Think about what is in your water jar that feels impossible, that feels like it could never be healed, or if it is, that you could never tell the story, or something that you haven't been willing to give to Jesus to let him heal yet. And just start asking for a willingness to give it to him. We don't have to give it to him right away. He'll still love us the same. But maybe just a willingness. Okay, God, I want to tell you about this. We'll deal with this now. Or can you help me get to the place where I'm willing to deal with this and just bring it before you? And you know, God may choose to use our story as a part of our testimony, or he may not. So don't assume that just because, you know, if God heals a certain area of your life or emotions or trauma, that he's going to use that story. Don't let that stop you. But just go before him and ask him what he wants to do. Let him meet you at the well. All right. Love you guys. Bye.